Hey, my name is Roy Canterbury. I'm going to be your host today on Archery Talk 101. Today, what we're going to go over is bow fishing, uh, the different things you have to think about and look at, different equipment used in bow fishing, how it's a little different than regular shooting. So to start off with, let's talk about the arrows. They can be used in, the recurve longbows, compound bows. Uh, the arrows are going to be made out of fiberglass. Originally, were just fiberglass. Now there are some now that fiberglass with aluminum on the outside makes them a little bit tougher, so you can shoot a little bit higher poundage bows with them. And to start off with, what they had in the fiberglass would be a hole in the back of it, right in front of where the nock is, and you tie your string onto there, and then fasten it to your bow. Now, there are multiple different ways of fastening it to your bow. You can be just a round cylinder that you wrap it around. You can have like fishing reels, the big fishing reels that use those and put a little stabilizer on the front to mount the fishing reel to it. There's also ones that have little canisters that fit in there and they shoot through. You pull a little trigger and you can crank them back in. But to start with the arrows, let's get back to the arrows and the differences between them. So originally, with your recurves and your longbows, normally it's a recurve for bow fishing, just because a lot of your longbows don't have any place to really fasten one. What you do is you draw back, and because the string is tight at the back of this arrow, then the string goes along your rest. Now, if you're shooting off the shelf, you don't have much for it to catch on. But when you do shoot, you have fairly good arrow flight because the string is pulling directly from behind the arrow as you're flying. So now when you have a rest on there, now you have to worry about where the string goes as you pull back, because what it can do is it can catch on your rest. If it catches on your rest, the arrow can come flying back at you, because that's where it's all of a sudden shooting out and then it starts coming back. It can be kind of dangerous that way. So what they did, the first one was they would take that hole in the back and then have a hole in the front, and then they would tie a steel cable to it and put a couple of beads on there and like a little swivel for fishing, and you'd tie your string onto that. Well, that helps solve the problem of the string catching on part of your bow. But what happens is, as you shoot, now you're not pulling to the side of the arrow instead of directly behind it. So now you're putting drag on side of it, and that arrow would now all of a sudden fly off to one side, depending on whether it was knocked on the top or the bottom or left or right. It would change the flight, so you wouldn't get as good of an arrow flight with it. Then come along another guide where you, on the back hole, you'd fasten a stop, and then another piece would fit around the arrow, and as you shoot, it would slide back and forth. So what would happen is, as you draw your bow back, this slide would start sliding to the front and it would stay. So the string hanging from the tip of your arrow to the reel, whichever type reel you happen to be using, would be very short. And now when you shoot, what had happened is that slide would slide down the arrow until it hits that stop. Now, the advantage of that one is it solved the first problem of the string catching on part of your bow or your hand as you're shooting. And then it also solved the second problem in the fact that you're pulling straight behind your shaft of the arrow, the nock point of the arrow, and you're pulling directly behind it. So now you get that good arrow flight back. Kind of the best of both the problems it solved with one item. So if you're setting up a bow fishing setup, I would definitely recommend getting one of those slides. They're not very expensive, but they're going to give you better flight as well as a safety factor that goes in there, because you don't want to have that arrow come flying back at you, because that knock end of that arrow is still pretty sharp. It can embed into you pretty good too. So that's what you want to look at there. So now we go into recurves are nice in the fact that they're quick, easy to shoot, really nothing to go wrong with it. You don't have to worry about as much of the other things going wrong on the bow. You do have to be concerned if it's a wooden bow or wooden riser being wet, because you are in a wet condition. Now then you have your compound bows. They're nice because they have a little bit more power, they're a little quicker, but you have a little bit more going on with them. For me, I shoot the recurve instinctively, and I get a compound in my hand and I draw back and I'm looking for an anchor point. I'm looking for sights and all that kind of stuff. That's just, it's a different weapon to me and I will shoot them differently. So for me, I struggle with the compound shooting instinctively just because I've never shot them that way. I get my recurve when I go bow fishing because I can shoot quicker with them. Draw back, get your anchor point, and just keep pulling through. So it's a little bit quicker for me. Each person's a little bit different. I know, shoot whatever you're used to. I would recommend putting on like one pin if you're going to go bow fishing. Now, as far as shooting into the water, you got to realize that where you see the fish, it's not there. A good example of how you can see what's going on is take a clear glass, fill it with water, and then stick something, a straight pencil or any kind of item that's round in there. You could put your arrow in there even, and then see, looking at the side, see what it does. As the arrow enters, looking at the side, it comes down and then it drops down if you're looking at it, from the side. So the fish is actually lower than where you're actually seeing it. So you need to shoot lower at the fish. Now, one thing you can do is you're not going to be shooting long range with it. They're always going to be fairly short. When you're shooting at water, you don't want to have a long shot because what you're going to have is you're not going to penetrate. You're going to be more skipping because you have that real sharp angle hitting water. The straighter up you're going into the water, the less you're going to have the arrow deflected as it hits the water. That's why you want to have that heavy arrow so it will penetrate through the water. That's why a lot of the bow fishing boats, you see this great big platform where you might be 5 feet up above the boat so you can see down into there and you see into the water, get more of that straighter down shot so you don't have as much off. So one thing you can do if you do have a compound or put a sight on there is take a look at where you're normally going to be shooting. What range, how high, how deep of the arrow, and then adjust your sight when you're practicing with it so it actually hits lower than where you're aiming. So if you aim at the spot, you want it to shoot low. So that's something you can do is if you do use a pin, set it up so that you can be aiming at it instead of having to aim low. You aim where you want the arrow to go, and then you have your sight adjusted to compensate for that reflection of the where the fish is actually at through the water. So that's a couple of things to think about when you're looking at shooting fish. The one thing you want to look at too is you want to consider how deep it is in the water. Now, if it's right at the surface, you don't normally have to worry too much about shooting in a different spot because they're right at the surface. Now, it's when they start getting below the surface, you have to start thinking about how deep are they? Where do you want to compensate for it? That's where, if they're shooting at the surface and you shoot deep, you may not want to adjust your sight to shoot low because then you're going to have to try and aim off when they're at the surface. So it's just a matter of practicing. Me, I'd probably just sight it in where it's going to hit, where I want it to go at probably about 10 feet because you're not going to have any much longer shot than 10 feet. And just know that, at the surface, aim where I want it to go. And then as they get deeper and deeper in the water, then you aim a little bit lower and lower. It all depends on how clear the water is too, because you have, a lot of the lakes here in Nebraska are not real clear. So you don't have the chance to see clear to the bottom. So if they're very deep, you're not going to get the shot anyway. So you want to look at whereabouts you're hunting or fishing, bow fishing, and see, what the water is like. If it's really clear and you can see down 5-6 feet, you're going to have some shots down that far. What you have to realize, though, is how much force you're still going to have because that water does slow that arrow down quite a bit. So you want to look at, your arrow. The heavier the arrow, the slower it's going to be, the more it's going to penetrate through that water. So that's kind of my thoughts here on bow fishing. It's a fun sport to do. Go out there and do some shooting, and you're normally not going to shoot game fish with a bow. you're going to, be restricted to more non-game fish like your carp and your buffalo and those type of fish, because say like you're out and there's a bass in the water and you have a certain size or weight restriction and you shoot that fish with an arrow, then you cannot return it. And if it doesn't meet specs, then that's a ticket, and game wardens will do that. If they see you bow fishing and you don't have your fishing permit and all the stuff you're going to do, and all of a sudden you bring up a game fish. So make sure you understand, what your fish looks like and save you from getting a ticket. You always got to make sure you're getting the right fish. The carp is kind of a big one normally for bow fishing, because they real productive in a lot of waters. And a lot of people don't think they're much good to eat, but I've cleaned them before. And look at the walleye, they got that Y bone structure. So does the carp, and they got the same bone structure in there. And if you flay them out, you get rid of those bones, so you don't have to worry about picking around them. I've smoked carp before on the smoker, and with I don't remember which one of the fruit woods it was, whether apple or plum or something. And when I was eating it, I thought it tasted almost like ham. So smoked carp is really good. You have to try that if you get some. You don't want to just shoot them and leave them on the bank, because that's wasted food. You don't want to be doing that, and it can be really good food to eat. You just got to learn how to prepare it. So that's kind of what I have here. If you are looking to get more information about archery, you can join the Archery Talk 101 Facebook group. There we have a lot of tips and tricks that you can do, a lot of educational videos to teach you how to do stuff. We can take a look at your equipment and see, what we might be able to do to help you. If you're having any kind of problems, post your questions out there. And then the other thing you can do is you can go out and take a look at the archerytalk101.com website. There I have a lot of information about different items in archery, some training tips, some working on tips, both tech tips, as well as links to products that I use and support. There's links out there for that. And if you're interested in getting a little better in your archery skills, whether it be your bow fishing or just regular shooting, I have a coaching program. So you can go out to the website as well and click on coaching lessons. And then there you can book a 15-minute call with me to get a little information. I can go through a couple little tips in there and see how I can help you out. That's a free 15-minute call. So go out there and fill out the form and book your call. So once again, this is Roy Canterbury. I've been your host today on Archery Talk 101.